Welcome to Latte tonight. So Lisi kind of stole my first question. I was going to ask the question about like who's ready for Christmas, who's not even begun yet. So I'm going to ask a different question instead. How many of you, this is your first time to Latte ever? All right, welcome. Now, how many of you, you've been coming roughly every month for like the last year? Can I see hands? Ooh. All right, how many of you have come most of the time, like most months, for like the last 3 years? All right, keep them up if you've been coming for like 5 years. 10? 15? 20? How many of you have been coming, like, I think it's 22 years now, right? How many of you have been coming the whole 22? All right. Woo! Super fun. All right, well, my hope is that whether this is your very first time at Latte or you've been coming for the last 22 years, that you feel really welcome here tonight, that you feel like the people around you are people that will quickly become sisters and friends to you. And so welcome. I want to say that, I hope that you leave here tonight just feeling like there's something that God gives you in your toolbox of things that you can use to follow Him, or things that He's going to peel back and do something new in your life. And so I hope it's not just a fun time, but that it's also a really meaningful time. But before we dig into what God has for us tonight, I'd love for you to turn to somebody next to you and ask the question, what is your favorite part of Christmas? Okay, so just take like 20 seconds to take. All right, did you all have a chance to share? All right, I love hearing people just talking, laughing, sharing. For me, if you were to ask me like what my favorite part of Christmas is, I would tell you probably the music or like just the beauty of the lights and all that kind of thing, right? You know what I really don't like? I don't like the gifts. I have to be honest, it stresses me out. So my husband actually does almost all the Christmas shopping because I hate it so much. I'm very cheap to a bad level, like an unhealthy level probably. And Sam actually likes buying gifts, and so he does it. And I feel kind of bad sometimes. I wrap them. I don't mind the wrapping part, but I hate the buying of presents. So now you know something terrible about me. That's why I think Thanksgiving's awesome because it's like all the fun and family and food without having to worry about the gifts. Is anybody else with me? Oh, there are some people. I thought I was going to be the only one. All right. Well, anyway, tonight we're going to talk about Christmas, but in kind of an unusual way. Maybe not your typical Christmas story. What's weird, though, is that, when they asked me months back to speak at Latte, and they said that the theme for this year is who we are in Christ, I was saying, Lord, what do you want me to share about? And the person that came to mind was a character that I thought, this person's life represents what it means to live by faith. And so I thought I would love to talk about this person. Oddly enough, little did I know that Pastor Tim was going to do this series called Unexpected, which is, I decided to tap into that and say we're going to talk about unexpected faith tonight, but that he was going to mention just one day before me, this very same person. I'm not bitter or anything like that. It's okay. But if you were here at Grace yesterday worshiping with us, then you already got to hear Pastor Tim talk about this person a little bit. But I hope we can look at kind of a new part of it and that it'll seem like it's still worthwhile. We're going to talk about the woman named Rahab. And the reason we're going to talk about her is because she had an unexpected faith, and you'll see why we're calling it that. But I would love if we could walk away with one thing, if we could walk away saying we are people who are now living even just incrementally more by faith, that would make my heart so happy. Like even if you just take one step closer to saying, I want to walk more by faith. Some of you are saying, I have no idea what that means. Well, we're going to look at that tonight. But one thing I want you to have in your mind right now, and we'll kind of take some time at the end to think about it, is this question: what practice do you have of living by faith? And what I mean by that is we have practices of celebrating Christmas, we have practices of celebrating birthdays, we have practices of doing all kinds of different things, but what practices do we have of living by faith? And so we're going to look at Rahab's story. Some of you are really familiar with her story already. Some of you have maybe never heard of her before, but I'm going to take us back about 1,400 years before Jesus' birth, and we're going to look at her story of when they were brought into the promised land. So if you're newer to the Bible, and let me just say, if you are, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. But maybe you're newer, or maybe you've been reading the Bible for a while, but you're like, the details are a little bit fuzzy on the timeline of things. Well, we're gonna kind of give you like a little recap of stuff. If you hate history and timelines, I was a social studies teacher, so I just think it's the best. But if you hate it, don't worry. We're not going to spend lots of time on it. It'll be really brief. But there's a little timeline here that can help you picture the timeline of the Bible. Okay, so if you're not familiar with it, the Bible is actually 66 books that all tell this continuous story from beginning to end, the story of God's love for his people and his pursuit of us. And so the first 39 books are part of what we call the Old Testament. Then the next 27 books are part of what we call the New Testament. And the dividing line between the Old and New Testament was the occasion of the birth of a little baby named Jesus, whose birth we're celebrating this month in Christmas. And so when he came, things changed a lot, but back at the beginning, we had the creation, and then what you'll see up there is the patriarch. Okay, so God decided that he wanted to have a covenant relationship with one particular family, and he chose a man, Abraham, because he was a man who lived by faith. And God said, I can do a lot through this guy. And so he established this really special relationship with Abraham, with all the people that were to come after him. But he didn't do it just for that family. He actually said to Abraham way back in Genesis, I want to bless you and then make you a blessing that will go to all nations. So that includes us. He wanted to bless you. He wanted to bless me. He wanted to bless all of us together through this special family. And Abraham's son was Isaac, whose son was Jacob, and then God changed Jacob's name to Israel. So that's why we refer to his people as the Israelites. If that's confusing, that's okay. But they're also known as the Hebrews or the Jews. So I might use all those terms tonight. But they're all telling about this special family. So then after a while, because of famine in the land, the people ended up leaving the land of Canaan, where God had blessed Abraham with that land. And God told Abraham beforehand it was going to happen. But he ended up leading them into the land of Egypt. And it's a big story about how they got there. But after a while, the people who had originally invited them to Egypt, they no longer were in charge. They didn't remember who they were. And so the Israelites became enslaved for over 400 years. Then God raised up a guy named Moses, and he went to Pharaoh and he said, let my people go. You got it, all right? You know, Pharaoh, Pharaoh. You guys know that song? Okay, we won't sing that right now. But so he led them out of Egypt then, and we call that the Exodus. And that's the next thing on the timeline. So then they're wandering around in the desert for 40 years, and that's a whole other story as well. But the time we're going to pick up here in the story in Joshua, the 40 years of wandering is done. Moses has died, and now his aide, Joshua, is taking over, and they're about to enter into the promised land. And so we're going to pick up the story in Joshua chapter 2. It's a little bit long, but stick with me. We're going to read the whole chapter. It's really, really good stuff. So it says, then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from Shittim, we'll say. I don't know how the right way is to pronounce it, but that's what I'm going to go with. Go, look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So these spies went, and they entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, bring out the men who came to you and entered the house, because they've come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I didn't know where they'd come from. So imagine, like was she scared? I would imagine she was a little bit nervous. So at dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. This is what she's saying to them. I don't know which way they went. Come, go after them quickly. You may catch up with them. But she'd actually taken them on the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she'd laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of Jordan, and as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came up out of Egypt, what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I've shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you'll save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we're doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord has given us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, "Go into the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves there 3 days until they return, and then go on your way." Now the men had said to her, "This oath you made us swear will not be binding on us, unless, when we enter the land, you've tied this scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, and unless you've brought your father and mother, your brothers, and all your family into the house. If any of them go outside the house into the street, their blood will be on their own heads. We will not be responsible. As for those who are in the house with you, their blood will be on our head if a hand is laid on them. But if you tell what we are doing, we will be released from the oath you made us swear." "Agreed," she replied. "Let it be as you say." So she sent them on their way, and they departed, and she tied the scarlet cord in the window. When they left, they went into the hills and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers had searched all along the road and returned without finding them. Then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. They said to Joshua, "The Lord has surely given this whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us." All right, so that was a lot. But to recap, Joshua, he sends these 2 spies to go and spy out the land, especially Jericho. They end up at the house of this woman Rahab. The king hears about it. He sends people to try to get them out. And then she sends them on the other way, and she helps them escape out the window. Now, my question is this: why did she help the men escape? What did she say to them in verse 9? We can look back. She says, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and a great fear has fallen on us." And then she goes on to say, "When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you, because the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on earth below." Did you catch this? This might not seem really crazy and amazing to you, but this is a non-Israelite, non-Hebrew woman. She would have had absolutely no one to teach her about who God was, the God that the Israelites served, and yet she knows that he is the one true God. And she says, "Well, our hearts are melting in fear because of it, because we know he's given this land to you, and you're coming in to take it over." Isn't that crazy? She says it so matter-of-factly, and I think that we can say, like, okay, what does this teach us about Rahab, that she would just say things so plainly to them? I think a couple things. One thing is I think she paid attention. All right, I don't know if she read it in the news or if she watched a documentary on it or what it was, but she knew what had happened 40 years earlier when they had crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. Okay, so she paid attention, she was observant, she saw what was happening. Secondly, she was bold. She knew that these men were spies from another country. It wasn't like she was just like, "I wonder who these guys are." Somehow she knew, and yet she had the boldness to approach them and to strike up a deal for her family. She was quick thinking. All right, so when the king's men came looking for spies, she had the good sense to hide them right away. If you're not sure what stalks of flax are, we have a picture here, because people would take them and they would dry these stalks of flax up on the roof, and so it wouldn't have seemed abnormal, but when they went to look for the men, they were hiding underneath it. So she's quick thinking. She goes and helps them escape and get hidden under the roof. It tells me, fourthly, that she really cared deeply about her family. So she was willing to risk harm. Like, what if the king's men had actually caught what she was doing? Would have been incredibly dangerous. She was willing to risk harm from these 2 guys, these random guys she's letting stay up on her roof during the night, halfway through the night, when she lets them back down. And then 5, she was a woman of faith in God as much as she knew. She said, "The Lord your God is God in heaven and on the earth below." So the fact that she knew that he was the one true God, I feel like is really significant because there are people today with far more information, far more opportunities to hear about it, and yet they don't have the kind of faith that Rahab had. And so we're going to come back to that thought in a little bit here. But what else is significant, the fact that Rahab did what she did, is if we look back at verse 1, she says, so they went and entered the house of a prostitute. Right? We'll look at the implications of this in a minute too, of why she was a prostitute. But let's go back and replay these events in your mind. So I want you to picture like Hollywood style, okay? Picture these two spies. Maybe they've got like hoods and they're sort of like, sneaking into town. And then they find some place to go. And I don't know, like if they knew that she was a prostitute right away, if she wasn't. I don't know why they chose her house. Was it that she was outside soliciting men to come in? Or maybe some other women were. Some people think that the word used for prostitute could actually indicate that she was like an innkeeper that would have served kind of like as a brothel. So it could have been that there were women out in the street saying, hey, come on in here. It could have been they just saw a whole bunch of guys going into this place and they thought, all right, this looks like a good place we can blend in. And maybe they were really shocked when they figured out why those guys were in there. It's unlikely that they went like pursuing her services. It would have been against the Hebrew law, but also I think Joshua would have chosen some guys of some pretty good standing and character, simply because, this is my own thinking anyway, Joshua himself, if you know his story, he was a spy in that exact same land 40 years earlier, and he saw what happened when 10 of his fellow spies did not have great character and strength, and they made it very difficult, and that's why they ended up wandering. So I think he would have chosen pretty wisely who his spies were. But whatever the reason, they ended up at this place. And so, like, picture them, I think of, like, Lord of the Rings or, something like that. They're sitting at this kind of cool-looking place, just sort of maybe sipping some water and looking around. And then all of a sudden, these guys come in and say, like, hey, we hear there's some spies in here. How did they know they were spies? I don't know. Was it their accents? Was it their clothing? We don't know how they knew they were spies, but they did. So I picture Rahab going over to them and saying, like, if you want to live, come with me. Don't ask any questions. And like they make this dash up the stairs and then she hides them. And, I don't know. Did they know that she was a prostitute when that happened? Maybe. I'm guessing they probably did by then. But they took her at her word and they went up and they stayed quiet until the people had passed. And when the king's men came to ask what had happened, she makes up this fantastic story like, oh, they were here, but they left. And then they just take her at her word, and I wonder, would they have thought, like, oh, a prostitute could have any kind of, clever way of, like, why would they not believe her? Like, they're probably thinking, she's just a prostitute. And my question then is, too, like, how did she become a prostitute? It's typically not a profession people choose, right? Usually it's they're forced into it by somebody else against their will, or they're just so desperate to provide for the people they love that they sell themselves into it. So most likely her family was very poor, and she was trying to do what she could to help them, or maybe somebody had forced her to do it and sold her into the sex trade, maybe even from a young age, we don't know. But I imagine she'd been abused and misused by men so many times. And yet we see in her this incredible strength and determination, especially in desiring to save her family. Now, the fact that her home was in the wall of the city also confirms to me the fact that she was probably very poor. That was where the poorest people lived. So if you can picture a wall that is so thick that it actually had a house inside it, that's where the poor people would live, because if they were attacked, that'd be the first place that would be attacked. It was the most vulnerable place to be. And so she was probably very poor for that reason. And yet I wonder, as I'm reading this story, thinking, like, I wonder how it is that she knew how to tell them what to do. Like she said, go up in the hills and hide for 3 days, and then the pursuers are going to come back and you can go on your way. And I just wonder, like, was it because she sat looking out that window of a poor person's house and she had watched other search parties go out and that's how she knew what to tell them? I don't know. Was the reason maybe because she'd had a lot of men come in to visit and soldiers, and she'd heard the stories of their exploits, and so she knew what to expect? I don't know. She was a prostitute, and that's maybe why she knew what she knew. She was a prostitute, and that's maybe why she had her home where it was. She was a prostitute, And she could have let this situation turn her away from this God that these people served out of anger or fear or confusion. But instead, she saw that he was actually the answer to her problems, the only one who could save her. She'd been dealt a terrible hand, yet she turned toward the all-powerful God, not away from him. One of you, my sisters, this past week heard that I was going to be talking about Rahab and said to me, "What could you have to say about Rahab?" Which, first of all, you're allowed to teach about things you don't have any personal connection to. But the reality is I do, sadly, like many of you, have a connection to Rahab in some ways. Like many of you, my story contains the ugliness of sexual brokenness. I was not a prostitute. I didn't ever have to use my body as a way to help provide for my family, so it wasn't the same level by any means. Yet sexual brokenness of whatever type often causes us to have to make a decision. Will we run toward God, or will we run away from him? So for me, my earliest memories of sexual encounters were when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I don't remember, I definitely didn't like it, but I also don't remember like hating it or trying to get away from it from other kids that had done things. The problem with sexual abuse or misuse is that it awakens in us desires that are not meant to be there until we hit puberty or adulthood. So when I was 8 or 9 and I had some other things happen, I feel like I was a fairly willing participant, which then over the years, of course, heaped all this extra shame on me. I think that, some people will have traumatic things happen and then they block it out and they don't think about it for years, but mine was the opposite. Like, I thought about it pretty much every single day. And even years after the things had stopped, it was like, I would just think, like, what a terrible person you are. Like, just shaming myself over and over again. And I remember when I was a teenager, my dad, who was like the super encouraging guy, he would often come up and he'd say, "You're a good kid." And, he's just trying to be encouraging, but I would just feel shame because I'd think if he really knew what kind of person I am, he would not be saying those things. For some of you, you might have similar things where you know the reality of brokenness. No, I was not a prostitute. My situation was not nearly as heartbreaking as Rahab's, and not nearly probably as much as some of you in this room tonight, but I did have a decision to make. What was I going to do with my brokenness and my shame? So when I was 18, I hadn't at that point yet told anybody in my life what had happened. I just thought about it and internalized it all those years. But one night I had the opportunity to talk to my youth pastor, and I confessed to him the things that had happened, and his response was, "Oh, Anna, that makes so much more sense about you." I just looked at him, I was very confused, and he said, "Anna, you blame yourself for everything all the time. You always heap so much shame on yourself, and I've never been sure why, and this makes so much more sense." And so he was able to help me start working through things, but I think when we have to work through the brokenness of our past, it's often a very slow, painful process. That's how it was for me, at least. But it was like peeling back the layers and just learning little by little to let go of the lies and the shame and the things from my past, and realizing like who I was in Christ and who my real my identity was. It was a very slow process, but very, very worth it. And if any of you were on this journey and maybe you're here tonight, you're like, face is really hot right now because you're thinking like, she's telling my story and I've never told this to anybody. You are not alone at all. Statistically, there's probably a third of us in this room who've been victims of some kind of sexual abuse. It's worth the journey, though, to start walking toward healing. But in the midst of trying to work through this myself as a young adult, I was talking to a childhood friend who'd had a lot of similar experiences to me, and she had a lot of the same things happen, but instead of running toward God, she found herself running away from him. And it led to a lot of anxiety and anorexia and just running further and further away from the one that she knew was the one who could truly help. And so as we were talking about it, she said, "Anna, I feel like we had all the same experiences, and I've let it destroy me, and you've let it strengthen you." And I don't say that as like I'm some kind of hero or something, because I'm anything but that. But I think her point is a valid one, that we have to realize the reality that we have an enemy of our souls who wants to steal and kill and destroy. That's what God's word says. He wants to be able to use the things of our lives, the hard things, and to destroy us through it. He wants to take the things that have happened to us, or decisions we've made, or things that we didn't want to have happen, and he uses it to like drag us into the mud and to rub our faces in the mud, and then he'll use that same muddiness to accuse us and say, look how terrible and dirty you are. He uses it both ways, and that's his scheme. That's the way he wants to do it. And maybe for you it's not sexual brokenness. Maybe for you it's something else. It's some kind of addiction, or it's some kind of greed or envy or bitterness. Maybe it's even just this stronghold of gossip or gluttony or lust. Like, it could be anything, but he wants to use it to be able to accuse you and make you feel like you're just stuck in it. He wants to accuse you and then tell you, like, you can't trust God with this stuff. You got to just be on your own with it. And sisters, I want to tell you tonight that that's a lie. That God loves you so, so much. He wants to take all these things from your life and redeem them. He loves you so much that he sent his only son to come and live a perfect life, and then to die on a cross to be able to cover the payment for your sin and mine. And he rose again. He conquered death and he conquered sin, and he's offering us new life in him, because that's how much he loves you. He wants to redeem your life and give you a new start. And I know this because I've experienced it myself, and I know it because I read it in stories like Rahab's. Now, if we keep reading in the book of Joshua, we would learn in chapter 6 about how Joshua went in with all the people. God told them to actually go and walk around the city one time each day for 6 days, and on the seventh day to walk around it 7 times in silence. And at the last time, then to have these big loud shouts, and the walls miraculously came crumbling down, except for Rahab and her house. And so the spies went in and got her, and God was faithful to rescue her and her family because she chose to turn wholeheartedly toward God and not away from him, and he delivered her. Friends, it wasn't just available to Rahab. It's available to each of us. No matter what your past is, no matter what things you've struggled with, God wants to be able to redeem your life as you walk toward him and not away from him. It doesn't instantly feel good. It's not like you just snap your fingers and everything's all taken care of. But he'll gather you and he'll guide you on this journey. He heals the hurts and the brokenness. He gives meaning to the things that we can't possibly understand. He helps us get out of our addictions and our patterns and our habits that are destructive. And he uses our stories to impact other people's lives for him. And so here's what I want us to take away from Rahab's story, is that in the end, her story was not defined by what she had done, but by the God she chose to trust in. So do you remember earlier I said that there are people today who have a lot more evidence of God and yet don't believe? And maybe that's your story. Maybe you're like, I'm kind of on the fence about this whole God thing. Like, it sounds interesting, but I don't know if it really like resonates with my experiences or my reality. And if that's you, I just want to say, I'm so glad you're here, and I'm glad you're even considering or wrestling. I promise you, he is worth the wrestling. Or maybe you're here and you're like, I believe, like, I think that faith is important. It's like an intellectual, like, I believe God exists, and I think that's good enough. And that's a great place to start. But I tell you, if you just leave it there, if it's just like an intellectual or mental assent to the truth, it's going to leave you lacking. And so I'd love to encourage you and say, like, explore a little bit more what it means to actually live by faith. Maybe for you it's like, it's a religious activity. Faith is like, I do the religious things. I go to church at Christmas and Easter, and maybe occasionally if, somebody's friends, kids getting dedicated or, something like that. But it's like, you kind of keep the faith thing in the faith category, and then you live the rest of your life. And I want to encourage you tonight to think about what would it be like to walk by faith every day, to have it be like this ongoing thing where you choose to allow God to work in you and through you and you walk with him. Or maybe for some of you, it's like you just can't get past the thought that, like, could God really love me? Because I've just messed stuff up too badly, and I just don't think he could use somebody like me. And I want to say that is definitely his favorite thing to do. He loves to take people and use them. Now, there are a lot of people that live today, and they have not been through, like, terrible, awful things, and yet they don't have lives that have had great impact on people, right? They've kind of just been doing their own thing. And so we get to actually choose which way we want to go. If we want to be people who walk by faith, and I promise you, people who walk like that will have greater influence because, like Rahab, it was because of her faith in the ability of God to save her that her story had significant impact. And that can happen to you too. Faith is what changes our stories from brokenness to purpose. Rahab's life had great impact because she was a woman who chose to live by faith, and she wasn't just stuck with the hand that she'd been dealt. And in fact, her story is so significant that it's repeated and talked about in the New Testament several times. So in the book of Hebrews, which is one of my favorite books in the Bible, the chapter 11 is this thing some people refer to as the Hall of Faith, because it's just telling story after story of people who have walked by faith in great ways. And so you can look at the screen with me here that in verse 1, it starts out by saying, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for." So do you catch that? Faith is having this confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we don't see. And the writer goes on to say in verse 6 that without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And then it goes on from there to tell the story of people like Abel and Noah and Abraham and Moses, and even the people we read about earlier in this chapter who crossed the Red Sea and the Jordan River. And so if we look at verse 30, it actually says, "By faith the walls of Jericho fell, and after the army had marched around them for 7 days." So God moved in response to the faith of his people, and he made the walls fall. But wait, what does the next verse say? The next verse says, "By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient." So she wasn't killed. Why? Partly because she hid the spies, but why did she hide the spies? It's because she had faith. She had faith in the God that she was putting her trust in. So how interesting that this non-Jewish prostitute woman would be mentioned with all these other great ancients of faith, the people who had walked throughout time. Rahab's listed among them. But wait, there's more than that. It wasn't just in the book of Hebrews. In the book of James as well, he talks about it. So James is trying to make the point that faith without deeds is dead. And he writes, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about the physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead." In other words, our deeds don't save us. Faith is what saves us, right? Faith in God alone is what saves us. But if we say we have faith and then nothing we do actually lines up with that, James is saying, like, your faith is dead, and it's actually probably not as maybe full and real as what you would like for it to be. And so he goes on to talk about how Abraham's an example of a man who walked by faith. He obeyed God. He didn't just take him at, like, say, "Yes, I believe in what you're saying," but he then went and lived it out. But if we look right after that in James chapter 2, verse 25, he goes on to say, "In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them on a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead." So did you catch that? He only gives two examples of people who lived by faith with the deeds that they did. One is Abraham, the other Rahab. Isn't that crazy? So she's listed amongst all these great people in Hebrews 11. She's talked about by James. It's just crazy. He said that she showed true faith in God because of the way that her actions accompanied her faith. So if you're somebody who, maybe you're here tonight and you're kind of like feeling a little bit of this, like, I don't know what to do with all this. Like, I think I'm a person of faith, but I don't know if I have what you're talking about. I would just encourage you, like, dig in, start investigating more, especially if you've never asked Jesus to forgive you of your sins, to cleanse you and wash you clean, to start a new life, to have him be the leader of your life. Today would be a great day to start. So don't leave here without knowing more about that. There's lots of us who would be happy to talk with you about it. Or maybe you are wanting to do this, but you're just feeling like, I don't know if I can get past the stuff of my past. Well, there's a lot of people also who would love to help you walk through that, and there's a couple things specifically I'd love to invite you to think about attending. So one of them is the Spiritual Freedom Seminar. So there are people who, they're walking with Jesus and they recognize, like, something's keeping me tripped up, and I just keep on hitting these things where I just can't get free from the accusations of the enemy or from, like, these sin habits and patterns that I keep going into. The Spiritual Freedom Seminar, which is being offered this Saturday, December 13th from 9:30 to 11:30 here in room 201, it's just a way, like, you kind of take this spiritual inventory of your whole life, and you're able to identify any areas where you've maybe unintentionally allowed the enemy to have access to be pushing you down and making you feel like you're just under his thumb and like you just can't get free. It's been life-changing for countless people. I would highly recommend it. It's a really, really good opportunity. Also, the Making Peace Retreat. If you were here in October, you heard Jamie Norton speak, and Jamie leads our Making Peace Retreat. Isn't she great? Like, she's just one of those people you just want to, like, just squeeze her. She's just great. And she leads the Making Peace Retreat several times a year, helps you work through the brokenness of your past, and there's a 10-week follow-up that goes after it. You can go to www.makingpeaceandbeyond.com for more information about when the next ones are. But also, counseling is a great thing. I'd encourage you. We have 7 affiliated counselors here at Grace. You want people who are going to be biblically based counselors who are going to help you work through the things from your past and figure out how do you get past those things and start walking in greater freedom. But whatever your thing might be, I just want to encourage you, just take the next step. Maybe for you is just believing for the first time that Jesus really can love you, that he really can forgive you and free you. Maybe like you know Jesus, but like it's time to start walking out your faith a little bit more, to have it be more than just a Sunday thing or a couple times a year thing, like to really start spending time reading his word and talking to him and developing relationships with other Jesus followers, and to just, if you sense that maybe he's telling you to do something, to say, I think I'm just going to step out in faith and do what I sense he's telling me to do. It's a super, really fun adventure. Maybe you've been trying to walk with him and you're feeling stuck, and for you it's going to be going to one of these things and saying, like, I want to get free. I want to be somebody who really can live by faith. So back to Rahab to finish up her story. You know, when she left Jericho, when everything had crumbled around her, it was just her and her family, and it said that they went to live among the Israelites. And so you think about, like, that was a lot that she had to do to start over again. She had to learn to live a whole new life amongst new people. I don't imagine it was a very easy thing. And you wonder, was it worth it for her? Did she ever regret that? And so I want to flip back ahead 1,400 years now to the book of Matthew, who's writing way after the time of Joshua and writing about Jesus. And if you were here yesterday, you know that Pastor Tim already ruined the punchline of my message when he talked about the genealogy of Jesus. And so we're going to read from Matthew chapter 1, starting in verse 1. He says, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. And then Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, who we will be hearing Rosie talk about next month. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David." So Boaz's mother was the prostitute. And if you know Boaz's story, I won't ruin it too much because I don't want to take whatever Rosie's going to talk about, but I just wonder if he watched his foreign mother and if that developed in him a heart for foreigners, because then you look at his story and he ends up letting this foreign woman glean in his fields and cares for her and eventually marries her. But then it keeps going on in the genealogy from David all the way down to Jesus. So here this foreign woman, this prostitute, becomes part of Jesus' family lineage. And I think that is a story of redemption. She got to be part of the birth of Jesus. And it's Jesus' birth we celebrate this month. It's him who, if you choose to run toward God instead of away from him, Jesus can come and transform every part of your life to redeem you, to make you usable, because the God of the universe loves you so much that he wants to take all the stuff that's been part of your life, all the good, all the bad, all the ugly, and it's like he wants to just wrap it up, wrap you up in his love, to walk with you, to bring purpose and meaning to everything in your life, because you walk by faith. And his desire is to use your story and your life of faith to proclaim to others the story of his unfailing love. Who you are in Christ is a person who's forgiven and who's able to live by faith. And more than any type of Christmas decorations or celebrations you do, it's your life of faith that's going to point people to the reason that we celebrate this time of year and this amazing Jesus that we follow.